Hello, everybody. It's Michael Hollands for Sound of the Movies. Today, I have the pleasure to be joined by film producer Adam Schroeder, who has produced and/or executive produced films such as Clueless, The First Wives Club, Ransom, The Truman Show, A Simple Plan, Sleepy Hollow, Bringing Out the Dead, Shaft, The Wonder Boys, Changing Lanes, Rules of Engagement, and many more. On today's episode, we will focus on the 25th anniversary of Sleepy Hollow. It is my pleasure to welcome Adam Schroeder.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It's great to have
Great.
you on my show. Thank you very much for taking your time out of your schedule. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's great time to talk about Sleepy Hollow because we've discussed this the 25th anniversary coming up. So it's
Yeah,
time to look back.
it's hard to believe that the film was released 25 years ago. And at the time, it was the third collaboration actually between Johnny Depp and Tim Burton in the late 90s. But as I understand, Adam, the film had been in development since 1993 ish.
hmm
And when did you get involved with the project?
In 1993 is when we started working on it, and with Andrew Kevin Walker, who at that time Seven hadn't come out, but the script was. I think it had been sold. Arnold Colpelson, I think, bought it, and it was going to be made. But it was an incredible script, and Andy's voice is just stunning, and yeah, it was exciting to be in business with somebody like that. Seven did cause a big stir around town, with its sale.
Yeah.
So.
Andrew Kevin Walker actually was quite in demand back then. I mean, he had also done Seven, which you mentioned, 8 millimeter, and
Mhm.
obviously Sleepy Hollow. So I think his voice as a screenwriter also was very unique, or has been quite unique. But it was based on the Washington Irving's short story. How did the whole screenplay take shape? Because as I understand, quite a few changes had been made also to Ichabod Crane's character. So can you elaborate on that?
Well, yeah, Washington Irving's novella was quite short, and I think a lot of people's memory of Sleepy Hollow was either if they were forced to read the novella in school, or there was a very famous Disney animation. I think it was a short film, but I think that kind of like put a lot of the what Sleepy Hollow and Ichabod Crane and that into the public's mind up until Andy got his version out there. And his idea was to, expand the story and the world and the backstory of Ichabod and the backstory of why these beheadings were happening in this small town. And so it became a bit of a detective story, but very dark. And his voice is, it's very singular. He writes a certain kind of wonderful story primarily. Yeah.
Thank you. And how would you describe the legacy of Sleepy Hollow, how the film stood the test of time, and perhaps also how it stands out in your filmography as a producer?
Mm. I hope it stands the test of time. I mean, I do notice that it does show up in a lot of the revival houses in out here in LA and New York and London whenever I'm there. And I will pull in Norma Desmond and I will go and see it again on screen. And it's new fans and people who saw it 25 years ago or 20 years ago or whenever. I think. I'm incredibly proud of it. It was an opportunity to work with Tim Burton and Andy Walker, and it was. We could probably talk about the production at some point if you like, but it was really an old-fashioned kind of movie making where everything was built on stage, and Tim has such a vision, and he's such an artist. So all of the trees were created and the forests and the sets were just elaborate and incredible. And I don't know, it was what I CG is kind of taken over in a lot of places nowadays. And at that time, it wasn't as prevalent. It was available, but Tim really wanted to do things as practical as possible, which was really exciting because, I think there's an emotion to that. I mean, we didn't cut people's heads off, obviously. That was visual effects, but it was quite different than a lot of things are made now, and even were being made then because we had the tools available. But getting to dive into Tim Burton's world is something that wow, I couldn't have been more excited about, and still to this day, incredibly proud of, and love his work and love him.
Yeah. Tim Burton has always been one of my favorite directors, and he brings something unique to the table. But as I understand, he wasn't attached from the word go. It was Kevin Yeager who was initially slated to direct,
Yes.
but that idea had to be nixed. Can you comment on that, and when you actually brought Tim Burton in?
Well, Andy and Kevin, it was their story idea, and they came in and sold it to us with Kevin to direct, and it was meant to be his first directing film. He's an incredible visual practical effects master. He created Chucky and a bunch of other very iconic physical effects. And while we were developing it, and things get back and forth, and this wasn't going to be an inexpensive film because of the period aspect of it. Whenever there's you're not just a Tim Burton world, but any world where you have to create all the costumes and all the sets, and everything has to be in 1899. It was going to be expensive, and we were working on the script and figuring out how to do it. And it was just decided, very amicably, because Kevin worked on the film. He did all of the practical effects, all of those heads, and all of the, creations for it. But because it was going to be such an expensive film, it was going to be was a Paramount Pictures movie. And they decided that we should look for somebody else who could, handle a very larger budget. So that probably answers the question. Tim was developing or was in pre-production on his Superman movie. I don't know if you know about any of he was making a Superman movie with Nicolas Cage, and they were in Pittsburgh, I believe, in prep, and it kind of hit a wall. I mean, they were in pre-production. It was supposed to shoot, and then it was Warner Brothers movie. It wasn't going to happen. And I knew Tim, and I knew this stuff was going on. So I got him the script really quickly before kind of anybody knew, I think, that he was available. I kind of got in there, and he really responded to it. It has, I hoped that he would, because it had a lot of things that I knew he was interested in, and, creating a world like that, and the horror and the fantasy aspects of it, kind of his brand in some ways.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if the number I have is correct, but the film cost $100 million. Is that accurate?
No. Did not cost 100. That's a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
I think it ended up costing 60 or 70. It was more than we had originally planned, but we were going to shoot it in the United States because it takes place in upstate New York. And, of course, we're going to go find a small little town. Maybe we'll go to Sleepy Hollow, actually, up in upstate New York. And we went to Sleepy Hollow. It's a very beautiful small town in upstate New York, but it's very modern. And you have the kind of old school or old style buildings, and the charm that we needed what didn't exist there. And we scouted a bunch of other places in the US and couldn't find it. It was just there was above ground lighting. It's something that you don't think about nowadays, but everywhere you go, there is, there's poles and beams and wires, and it was it was before it was so easy to just erase those things with CG, which is weird because like, I mean, we can do it on our computers now or on our iPhones, but back then it didn't make a lot of sense. So we decided to look in the UK where there was tax incentive, and Tim had worked before, and we decided to do it there. So that upped the budget a bit right from the get go because we had planned on shooting it locally or in
Okay.
US.
Okay. And the location and the whole look plays a big part, or is a big part of this film. And obviously, costume design also plays a big role. Colleen Atwood, one of Tim's regular collaborators, so to speak. It was shot by Emmanuel Lubezki. He was the cinematographer. I would like to talk about the whole look because it has a unique atmosphere that it
Yeah.
provides. And it was also kind of quote unquote new for Tim Burton because he hadn't done a film which went into that direction.
Yeah.
So, how did you and Tim talk about the essence of cinematography, what was required, and how everything also meshed with production design?
Yep. Well, Tim is an artist, like a straight on, went to art center in LA, animator. He draws, he paints, he does also. He comes with a vision, and he also Colleen Atwood was, like you said, a longtime collaborator of his, and Chris Levinson, who was the editor, another Tim crony in a good way, and Rick Heinrich as well. I believe they even went to art school together. And this might have been the first movie that Rick designed for Tim. He had done some other things, I think, but it might have, I could be wrong, but I think it was the first movie that he designed for Tim. I should have checked that, but cinematographer Chivo Emmanuel Lubetsky was kind of new, but he had shot uh, he's from Mexico, and Alfonso Cuarón and Guillermo del Toro, and there were this group of incredible filmmakers, and Chivo was their DP down on Inarritu as well, and he shot Great Expectations, a kind of modern remake for Warner Brothers, one of the most beautiful films to see at the time, as well as a Little Princess. And we had worked with Chivo to do some additional shooting on a movie. He came in after it was cut together, needed to do some additional shooting. So we got to know him, and Tim had seen those films. We watched them again, and yeah, Chivo and Tim's collaboration was certainly incredible, and that was the first time they worked together, and perhaps the only time, I think. But all of those department heads were nominated for Oscars. Rick won an Oscar for it. I think Chivo and Colleen should have. We were all together that night at the Oscars, and there was a Mike Leigh movie called Topsy Turvy that kind of came out of nowhere, and it was a wonderful film, and no harm, no foul. But very happy for Rick. But I felt that Chivo and Colleen's work, and so many other of the people like Chris Levinson should have been recognized as well. But that's what happens. And then they both went on to win multiple awards afterwards. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna say Colleen has won 4 Academy Awards so far
Oh
and
yeah.
been nominated 12 or 13 times, if I didn't miscount. Chris Levinson, 2 nominations. Yes. Yeah, he should have been nominated at least for Sleepy Hollow. Yes, yes. Certainly think that would have been a smart
I mean,
decision.
yeah, knowing how the movie was made and how it needed to be cut together, his work was masterful. It really was on that
Yeah.
film. Pretty much everything he does. So, and Danny Elfman's score, was incredible, and we were surprised that he wasn't recognized. But it was a horror movie, and the fact that it got 3 nominations at the Oscars, which was very traditional at that time. Still, there weren't a lot of breakaway. Silence of the Lambs was, something that was very surprising when it kind of swept. I don't know, in 1990 or so. But
92, yeah.
82. Okay. Yeah. And we were, I don't know, it was still kind of getting up to the modern times, maybe the Oscars. And
Yeah, Silence of the Lambs is a great example because psychological thrillers do not tend to be recognized or acknowledged, much
Yep.
less with 5 Academy Awards. So that was certainly a step into a different direction. Yeah,
Sure, for sure.
and a
Yes.
fantastic film. It's a
Classic.
masterpiece.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And absolutely stands the test of time. Yeah.
Yeah. And Danny Elfman's score, obviously, I was going to ask you about the score as well. I know you told me up front you didn't attend the sessions, but obviously you probably had some communication
For sure.
with Danny
Hmm.
after all. So I am especially fond of the first couple of minutes of the film actually, when you see the character actually preparing all the paperwork, and then he puts the stamp on the documents, which I think
Yeah.
is a fantastic piece of music. So, how would you sum up Danny's work, and of course, what a good score needs to do in order to not only
Mhm.
support the film but to elevate the film to a new level?
For sure, for sure. Well, Tim and Danny had a long-standing relationship, back to maybe Frank and Weenie, definitely Pee Wee, and and I think he scored all of Tim's films prior to Sleepy Hollow. So that was always going to be there's such a magical collaboration between the two of them. The movie, because it is a period piece and it is a fantasy and it's world creation. The score. All scores need to enhance the storytelling and enhance the world and be nuanced when they need to be and be dramatic and forceful when they need to be and in Danny's work on this film, I mean, I think it's incredible because a lot of the cues are variations of kind of the main theme, but he'll goose them up with a choir and different instruments to for the romantic scenes with Ichabod and Katrina. Yeah, it's I don't know. I love listening to film scores, and it's super narcissistic to say that this is one of my favorite ones, but it really is. I mean, it's really moving music. It's orchestral and it's lush and it really kind of fills out the scenes that it's enhancing. They work so beautifully together, and I think that is a testament to Tim and Danny's communication and relationship and understanding of each other. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think that Danny Elfman is one of the most unique musical voices in the business, and he also managed to develop a certain style which is simply recognizable. You simply know
He's
it's
like an
it.
auteur.
Yeah, it's a Danny Elfman score, but he also is very versatile, and he has, let's say, written some of his best work for Tim Burton, and the collaboration or the hard work certainly has paid off. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when as a filmmaker, no, I'm not talking as a filmmaker, I'm not a director, but I think when a director finds those collaborators that speak the same language and understand their vision, and it's kind of synonymous, like with Colleen and Chris and Rick and Danny. I think it doesn't make it easier, but it there's a way of communicating that I think is hard to get to, with a new person, say, and it happens every day and with every film. But if you find those who understand what you what you are doing and what you want to do and what you mean and what you feel, I think keep them keep
Yeah.
them close always.
Yeah, for sure. And Adam, you previously mentioned that Tim had intended to shoot many of the scenes with using practical effects, but ILM also was a factor or a
Oh
contributor
yeah,
to those
absolutely.
effects. How much work or how extensive was post production due to ILM's involvement?
Well, ILM, Jimmy and Teresa were our on the ground boots on the ground via VFX pals, and they were there from prep into production. They were with us in London, and we were on somewhat of a accelerated post, you know. So I think we shot from October 98 to May 99, and we came out in November 99. So that's not a lot of, I mean, it's 5 months, but that's, you know, you have to market the film and all of that. So yeah, their work was incredible. I think I mentioned we didn't obviously chop people's heads off, you know. That was VFX, and there were other things. I mean, Chivo's style was very specific. There was a lot of smoke. There was a lot of, you know, atmosphere going on, and, you know, matching that to the exteriors and the sets, because while we did shoot almost, I would say 75% of the film on set, we also did build the town of Sleepy Hollow in a marsh on in Hertfordshire, and which was kind of ironic because ultimately we didn't find that town in the UK that we didn't find in America as well. But man, that town that Rick designed and Chivo shot was just brilliant and incredible. So, but anyway, getting back to the ILM, yeah, I mean, listen, they're the best in the business, and Jimmy and Teresa had just come from doing the first Star Wars sequel. What, you know, the one from the 90s, maybe it was episode 1. I think they had just come from that, and they had also shot I want to say Harry Potter, but maybe Harry Potter might have moved in after we did. We took over a stage in London called Leavesden. Yeah, we were only the third movie to shoot there. It was an old Rolls-Royce factory, and a Bond film, I think GoldenEye, shot there, and then the Star Wars episode 1 shot there, and then we did, and then right after we shot there, Harry Potter moved in. So they did Harry Potter afterwards, not to take away, you know, and then Harry Potter took it over for 10 years, and then it's now a legit mega studio with even a Harry Potter ride exhibit, and it's a bit of a amusement park-ish kind of thing. So, but they still shoot a lot of films there in North London. Yeah.
The film is pretty graphic at times. And did the MPA, the Motion Picture Association of America, actually approve the cut as it was, or did you have to resubmit it actually?
I don't think I don't think Tim had made an R-rated film at that point. And I think this was always going to be, it was going to be too much for PG-13. It you know, it's just the nature of you chopping off heads. I think the one scene that, well, I recall the one scene that we had to be very careful with, and it's a rough scene, was the family that's killed. It's the mother and father and the little boy, and the little boy is, you know, under the floorboards, and after the Headless Horseman bursts in, and he's down there, and we're hoping that he, you know, will be okay, but he's not. But we don't see it. But I think that was something that we were, you know, purposefully careful about, because it's, you know, that's harsh. But it had happened because, you know, they were part of the evil plot of the Headless Horseman to get rid of that bloodline.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting point. Yes, you do not see the little boy getting killed. All you hear is him screaming, and then the horseman walks out of the door with the bag in his hand. So you obviously can put 2 and 2 together that he was also murdered. But the murders of the parents was certainly more graphic. Yeah.
Yes. I think yeah, it's you know, you do want to be sensitive and careful about that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
That happened, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I would like to talk. I would love to talk about the casting process. Adam, as I mentioned before, Johnny Depp and Tim Burton had worked together prior to Sleepy Hollow on a couple of occasions. And but I also heard that other actors had been considered, or you had been asked to at least consider them. I think Daniel Day-Lewis, Brad Pitt, Liam Neeson. Are those names correct?
There were other actors considered. I prefer not to confirm or deny, but I will say there was a casting process. Johnny was uh, the incredible thing about him, his career always, and he did very unusual projects. He didn't go the route of studio commercial movies for the most part. And so he didn't have maybe that box office thing at that time. So he wasn't the, you know, at a studio, you want or they want to have very established movie stars to put on their posters and to market. Obviously, the Tim Johnny relationship was super exciting to myself and the other producers, but we had a fight for it because it was just it's still the way it goes today. It's Johnny hadn't done big budget films at that time, and maybe his box office wasn't at that point, but we were able to make it happen, and he just brought so much to the film and to that character. You mentioned about Ichabod changing from the Washington Irving, but it changed even more once Johnny got his hands on Ichabod.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And sometimes it's very tricky to get a project off the ground, and the studio, or let's say also the people that provide financial backing, feel more secure if a certain star commits to a project. That can certainly help.
And this was going to be a large budget movie for that time, so it's checks and balances. If you can stack the deck as best as possible for success, you do. But the other actors that were considered might have been incredible, but it would have been a totally different movie. It would have been maybe more of a traditional take on Ichabod, and Johnny found the comedy and the nuance and Tim's quirkiness and the way Tim's vision of the world and Johnny's were very synonymous, talking about those department heads that speak the same language. But it was kind of interesting because it was early in their career. I guess they had only done Edward Scissorhands and Ed Wood, two Ed's movies. So beforehand.
Yeah, sounds correct. Yeah. And how did you and also the casting directors, Susie Figgis and Eileen Starger, I hope I got the name right.
Starger. Yep. Eileen Starger was a casting director that I worked with quite often, based in New York, and we started casting the movie with her. And then when we went over to London, we hired Susie to work with Eileen, and they worked together because we had I think we had put together a bunch of the lead cast, but then it was actually kind of a great thing that we ended up in England because we were able to work with some of the best actors, character actors, Michael Gambon and Miranda Richardson and Michael Goff and Ian McDiarmid, and even people coming in for tiny parts, just because there's such a wealth of incredible talent. So it was really wonderful, and we would have gotten great casts in the States, but this really kind of enhanced this I don't know, the epicness of the film and the kind of history of it, Yeah,
absolutely. And I heard that at some point it was considered to shoot the film in black and white, but it was ultimately nixed.
That was another filmmaker who wanted to do it. That wasn't Tim. That was another filmmaker that we talked about who wanted to do it. And he wanted to shoot it in black and white and silent. So that wasn't going to fly with Paramount as well. It wouldn't have been a very interesting, incredible experience, but it wouldn't have been a Paramount picture of the 1990s.
Interesting. I can picture the film in black and white, but not as a silent movie.
Yeah. Well, the way that Chivo and Tim worked, it's so easy, digital, you can manipulate, and but they wanted a kind of black and white feeling. It had this kind of gothic style, very influenced by the old Hammer horror films, which was a real touchstone for Tim. And it was really fun to kind of dive into those movies for reference. And Tim had a real expertise in those films as a Chivo. So we had to shoot it and then go through a bleach bypass process was what it was called, and that's how but it still had to be lit, knowing that that's what the final product was going to be. So there were a lot of interesting tests that we did, and figuring out how to light, because you do light for black and white, you do light for color, and this bleach bypass product process, Chivo lit for that.
Yeah, and obviously the color scheme is great, and you couldn't shoot the film using vivid colors. It wouldn't have worked. The impact would have been lost, and look, it feels pretty desaturated also.
Yeah.
And obviously that was a goal which added tremendously to the whole atmosphere of the picture. And did you have test screenings on the film? Was it mandatory or?
Yeah, absolutely. That was just the thing that was done and is done. The reception to the film when we first showed it to them was very positive. Sherry Lansing was the chairperson of the studio, and Michelle Manning and John Goldwyn were the presidents and our executives. And it screened really well. And then we wanted to do some additional photography, which, when they like it, they let you do that, which was cool. So we were able to go back and shoot a couple of days of inserts and close-ups, this and that, to kind of, enhance, which was, it's not like when you have to shoot like a month or 2 months and because you haven't told your story or it doesn't make sense. So we like those kind of responses. Yeah. And marketing had been working on it from the time we were in prep. So they were very excited about the movie and all the things that they could do and all the products and obviously not product placement in any way, but there was a line of toys that Todd McFarlane did, and there were all kinds of other really cool marketing opportunities. And Paramount had the best marketing and distribution departments in the business at that time. Arthur Cohen and Nancy Gallagher and Rob Friedman, just it was they wanted to eventize it, so there was a lot of preparing and figuring things out, and wanting to kind of include Tim, which is super important because it was his vision. I mean, I think it's called Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, which which is pretty cool.
Right. And obviously, a film is divided into multiple stages. I mean, at some point, the film is in development, then obviously the project gets greenlit, then there's pre-production, principal photography, and obviously also post-production. Do you feel that once the ball is rolling, things tend to get a bit easier, or do you think that on many occasions all of those stages are equally demanding?
I absolutely believe and stand by that each of those areas is as important as the other. You can develop the greatest script in the world, and then if you're not on step during production, then it might not translate, and then you have to finish the film, and films are somewhat created in the editing room and in post and in with the visual effects and the score and all of the sound and all of that. So I don't know how you don't consider each of those areas paramount. Well, ironically, or equally important, because if one dips, then all of the hard work and all of the great intentions and it won't be the film that it should be,
Yeah.
or could be.
Yeah. And when you shoot a film and produce a film, there is a tremendous amount of responsibility, obviously, and sometimes even the best scripts can be ruined. And you can make or break a film in many different ways. If when principal photography has gone well, or if it has gone well, you can totally butcher and ruin the film during post. I mean,
Well, you mentioned the testing process, and I luckily have never been involved in a situation where the testing has so dictated the film that changes are made, and the director's vision, and what you started with, the what the movie should be, or what you believe it should be, and what the writer wanted it to be, and why they wrote it, and what the actors put into it. A lot of times that does happen. Like I said, I've been lucky not to have had an experience like that, but that happens all the time. Nobody sets out to make a bad film or an unsuccessful film. And sometimes films are ahead of their time, and sometimes films are just not met with the reaction you hope. But we have so many films that are found years later and become these classics. Maybe they were ahead of their time, and they didn't do well box office wise, and they weren't awarded, and then they're realized that those people knew what they were doing. I mean, there are so many examples of that. I think.
Yeah. A box office success, to me personally, has never been an indicator for or of quality. I mean, you can totally bomb at the box office and actually have produced a masterpiece. It's
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
It used to be that box office wasn't so tied into the success of a film, because a film could be an art film, and it could sweep the Academy Awards, and it's not a blockbuster. It's a piece of art that was appreciated at the time for the audience that appreciated it, and then as the years go by, it becomes, Kubrick's films were pretty much never box office successes, and many of the classics in my cinema log that I admire and watch again and again, but they weren't received well, and sometimes things don't get the shot nowadays if it doesn't kind of hit that moment.
Yeah. I think Kubrick, that's a great example. He never really received the recognition award-wise which he deserved. The same goes for Alfred Hitchcock, for instance.
Yeah, of course. Neither won Oscars. Maybe Alfred Hitchcock got an honorary, but yeah, isn't that great? I think he might have only even been nominated twice for Psycho.
I think he had yeah, 2 or 3 nominations for directing, I believe. Yeah, and look at the other great filmmakers who have yet to win the Academy Award for directing. Ridley Scott, for instance, comes to mind.
I know. I mean, and just the master, and he doesn't stop. And it's well, maybe Gladiator 2 will be his one. His time.
Let's see what happens. And obviously, as a producer, you have to face many tasks on a daily basis. Also, of course, directing traffic, solving problems, making sure that the film is on budget and on time. So, can you comment on, or can you recall an on or offset problem which needed to be fixed, either a camera not working, or you had to switch locations, or anything out of the ordinary which demanded immediate attention?
One thing comes to mind. I don't know if it exactly is the answer to the question, but as I'm telling you this, I'll be thinking on the other side of my brain. But we were shooting in England in the winter, and England, and we were very much in interior. Like I said, we shot on stages, but then we came to the month or so that we were shooting on the set of Sleepy Hollow, the actual town. And I do remember one day in particular, it had rained a lot while we were shooting in the exteriors. Of course, it was not raining when we were inside, but once we went outside, started to rain, lots of mud, lots of it made it, but it kind of worked for an 1899 small town in upstate New York. But there was one day when we were shooting in the graveyard, and because Chivo had the atmosphere and the way he was shooting it in the interiors with a lot of smoke and a lot of that kind of thing, and a very kind of and because of this bleach bypass process, everything had a match. And there was one day in particular where like the sun came out in the morning and didn't go away the whole day. And I just remember we had to kind of stop shooting because the smoke that we would fill, even outside, wasn't settling the way it should because it was sunny, and the sun was just not gonna match it. It's just this kind of horror gray kind of thing. So I do remember kind of how absurd that was, that we were praying for the clouds to come over the sun, which is usually you want the sun out there to use the light. There's also a funny thing. Chivo developed this incredible way of lighting because for these exteriors, because it was meant to be moonlight, and he created this balloon, which had never been done before. I think it's done quite often now, but a balloon that was filled with lights that could be controlled, like as you would a grid in a stage. But this was a way to kind of create the moon and put them up on cranes, and this giant kind of orb that would kind of mimic what the moonlight would be. And the first night that we used it, because we were shooting nights for that, there were all these reports in the countryside of London about this UFO that people were seeing. They could see this this balloon that we had hovering above, and they thought it was a UFO. So we had some cops come, and there was a little bit of an investigation, but we weren't doing anything wrong. It was just a little bit of a War of the Worlds panic thing going on in the English countryside. But the shoot went pretty smoothly. I mean, it was I don't know. Every day there's a new challenge that you need to deal with, and you need to stay on time, and you need to make your schedule and all of that. But Tim's a very responsible filmmaker, and working from storyboards, and working from for the sequences. So I'm not saying it was easy, but it was. We knew what we were doing. We had and the British artisans were just incredible as well. Another great benefit for being able to shoot in England were just the standby painters and the craftsmen, and all of the the props were incredible. And yeah, so I don't know. I haven't shot in London again, and I would love to. It was really a joy, really great community.
We did talk about this, but I mean the different stages of filmmaking. In your role as producer on Sleepy Hollow, which part of the film do you think demanded the most attention for whatever reason?
Probably probably the production, because it was a big production. Sometimes there were a lot of extras, and there were a lot of moving parts, and horses on stage, and doing these chase scenes on stage with horses. A lot of safety issues that that's on me. But again, that was such a joy, because it was incredible to go to set every day and be in this created world of Tim and Rick were using forced perspective on a lot of the sets. So in the distance it would look like things were going away, but it was just because the way that the sets were constructed. And yeah, it was I don't know. I just think it felt like old fashioned movie making in the greatest way. When I think of like Sunset Boulevard, or not that was, but things were made that way because they had to, sound for other reasons. And Tim really, I think, because the Ham horror films were such an influence, and they were all pretty much stage made films at the time, and I think they were stage made to keep them cheap. This wasn't the case in this movie, but it was a really exciting way to work. Yeah.
Thank you. And in terms of the final cut of the film. Did you have final cut privileges on this film, or did you leave it to Tim?
I would absolutely say it would be Tim. I think he was a filmmaker who, if he didn't get it, and I'm probably sure he did, then you give it. It's his. It's his vision as a filmmaker. And I'm not saying all filmmakers shouldn't have final cut, but sometimes that's not the case. But yeah, this was a Tim Burton film. And when you're working with a master like that, it's not like you don't have an opinion and you don't have a voice. Certainly we do, and the studio does as well. And sometimes my job is being the in the middle of the studio and the filmmaker, and that can be complicated, but it's part of the job.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have worked with a variety of great filmmakers. And you co-produced Ransom, which I think is one of the best Ron Howard films of the 90s. You also produced the Jim Carrey, the Truman Show.
Sure.
The Truman
Peter
Show.
Weir. Peter Weir.
Peter
Yeah.
Weir, absolutely. You do have a great variety in your filmography. I mean, we are talking about so many different films, which you also executive produced. The First Wives Club obviously has a much more different tone than Ransom or Clueless, for instance. So, how do you gear up for the challenge of working with a different filmmaker on a different project? I mean, obviously, many of those have a completely different personality.
Oh God, yeah, yeah. Well, of course, and that's what you want from them. Everybody's individual, and these are people with passion, hopefully, for what they're doing and a real point of view. In terms of preparing, I mean, I'm lucky enough most of the time to get to work with them on the script at the beginning point with the writer and the director. And then as we're going into casting and we're going into pre-production and all of that, being able to spend time with someone, you get to know them and you get to know what they need. And all filmmakers need different things and sometimes the same things, but it's very individual. And I just find it super important to get to know that person and for them to get to know me and hopefully like me and trust me, because it is about trust and it is about relying on other people, because while the director is the captain of the ship, I think the most successful and the smartest directors rely on their team. They and maybe sometimes a newer filmmaker doesn't realize how important it is to kind of trust. You hire people for a reason. You like their work. You've met with them. But you have to get to know them and you have to trust. So I think it's about building relationships and providing what people need to do their job. Yeah.
What do you think is the most difficult or demanding film you ever produced?
Oh geez. Oh God. Wow. They all have their quirks. I mean, Clueless was the first movie that I produced, and the challenge was that I'd never done it before, and it was also a very low budget movie for Paramount, and teen movies weren't a thing. So that was challenging because I was literally trial by fire. But Amy Heckerling, a wonderful, wonderful person and a brilliant, brilliant writer, director, filmmaker, let me in and let me learn and do. And I don't know, I don't want to say that was most challenging because it was actually the most, I don't want to say the easiest either, but it was such a small movie for Paramount that they kind of left us alone. So most times there's a lot more contact with the studio, and obviously they were interested in what was going on, but I think they were making Mission Impossible at the time, and that big movie is this was just this little thing that they were letting me do or letting us do, and if it failed, then maybe nobody was going to lose their jobs on that Monday morning, but it had a nice happy ending. I don't know. They all have their peaks and valleys. They're all challenging, and just getting anything made back then to today is just a miracle. Like it's I don't know. I don't think anybody has any idea everything that has to go into getting something out there and making it great, because that's what you want to do. But there's so many fits and starts, and in film, it can take many years. Or I made one film for Fox a couple of years ago where from the day I sold the script to them to the release was 18 months. I mean, I just like, that was insane, but incredible. But again, a small film that was a bit off the radar. So that's a kind of maybe a lesson that I should learn.
Yeah, and I love Clueless. By the way, I think it's such a sweet comedy, and one of my favorites of the 90s. And also, I remember talking to the cinematographer Bill Pope about the film, and I also mentioned to him that Dan Hedaya's character was probably my favorite character of the whole movie. Hilarious, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, and that was incredible to have Bill on that film. He had done these amazing Sam Raimi movies, but didn't necessarily say teen Beverly Hills comedy, but his just art of camera movement and lighting and energy. And he's gone on to such giant movies, and the Matrix movies and big superhero movies and all of that. But yeah, that was it's always kind of wonderful, the team you get to work with.
Yeah. He also did Bound for the Wachowskis back then.
Yeah.
That was low budget, so they did a fantastic job, all things considered. Yeah.
I think he did do that just before. I think I remember we were looking at Bound because that was so beautifully shot, and that was the Wachowskis' first film. And yeah, beautiful work.
Yeah. I know we are almost out of time. What's actually next for you, if I may ask?
I'm making a movie called Creatures of the Night, and this summer in New York, and it's the true story of how the Rocky Horror Picture Show became the phenomenon that it became, and is still playing at midnight all around the world, and it'll celebrate its 50th year next year. And the true story is it was a bomb when it came out, and it's a good way to cap this off. It was a movie that Fox made, and then administrations changed, and they didn't know what to do with it, and it was badly reviewed, and it was not selling tickets. And a marketing guy who had real passion for it he talked them into letting him show it on midnight screen in New York at the Waverly Theater, try to offset some of the losses. And that first night that they tried it, and midnight movies were horror movies or obscure foreign films. It wasn't like it is today. It was not packed. It was, maybe people were sleeping in the theaters. But they put the Rocky Horror Picture Show up, and this group of kids, the New Yorkers, misfits and people trying to find their way in the world, saw it that night, and they banded together and created the shadow cast and the props and the callbacks, and it became one of the most profitable films of that year, as well as in history, and again still plays every night, every Saturday at midnight all around the world. So doing that.
Yeah. Great. Looking forward to it. And is there anything else you would like to add before we wrap up for today?
No, it's just such a pleasure, and I'm super excited that Sleepy Hollow is celebrating this 25th anniversary, and I hope people will go see it, and I hope that we'll go see it on screen. I love going to see movies on screen. I'm old school like that, and not to hate on watching on our giant screens that we have today, but movies are made a certain way to be shown a certain way, and they all will end up in these other ways. But if you get a chance, go see Sleepy Hollow on screen. It was shot on film, and it was all practical, and I think it's a work of art and a true Tim Burton film. Yeah.
Great. Adam, thank you very much for taking so much time out of your schedule. I really appreciate that, and I had a great time talking to you, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well.
I absolutely did. Thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure. I hope we can talk about other anniversaries at some point. Clueless's 30th anniversary is coming up next year. Maybe we should talk about that again.
would love to. Thank you very much, Adam. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.